Chapter 2, Vegas Trip. One afternoon, I overheard my mother talking to my father over the phone. She was explaining to him that my brother and I were throwing away our money, and I specifically didn't know when to quit. She came to this conclusion after watching my homeboy Roscoe, my brother, and I playing blackjack on the living room floor the night before. We both took Roscoe's money, then my brother loaned him some money to get back in the game. It was getting late and I was winning $800 at the time, but instead of going to bed, I decided to gamble all night, giving all the money back plus the crumbs that I started with. When Moms got off the phone, she suggested that I spend more time relaxing and enjoying life instead of dedicating my life to things that may leave me stressed or depressed. She was not only speaking on gambling, but other aspects of my life as well. She warned me that this new age of women were too fast, too daring, and an average man could never be enough. She then went into this comparison to gambling. She stated gambling was a fast way to win and lose money, too risky, and the average gambler would be hard-pressed to find success. More specifically, she was insinuating that love was for suckers, and if attached to an unfaithful woman for too long, she would ruin me. If I was to love gambling, I could also become hooked and spiral downward like a crashing jet. In order to be successful at gambling, I would need to set limits on how much I could afford to lose and how much I could reasonably expect to win. Whichever came first could dictate a stopping point.
Kev Mac, King Real,
Moms preached to me that gambling was for recreation and not something I should spend much time doing. I guess you could say she was preparing me to slow down and stop for red lights, but I found more excitement in running them. My father, on the other hand, loved to flaunt his wealth and encouraged me to live for now and to buy the finer things. He made it a lot easier for me to become a gambler by routinely inviting me to Vegas with him. He always talked about how lucky he was and how much self-control he possessed. If only he were telling the truth. My parents both loved Roscoe, partly due to his mannerism, but my father admired his courage as a youth to challenge guys larger in size. Pops was proud to learn that the three of us were hanging out together, especially because my brother and I weren't always on good terms. We hadn't squashed our sibling rivalry until nearly my 21st birthday. One evening he was standing in the middle of the street talking to T-Vic and some of our non-affiliated childhood friends. Some blood gang members sped down our block towards Slauson, hanging out the window. "Get off the street, blood!" the passenger yelled. I happened to be walking out the house with a Tech 9 in my hand when I seen them speeding off. I ran towards my brother's red Jeep, demanding that we chase him down. I jumped in the passenger seat and we chased after them. As he ran the stop sign, turned in the corner on 57th Street, he almost flipped the Jeep. He sped down the hill past the back of 54th Street School in pursuit, but they got away. We actually held a conversation on the way back, which was very odd. We both agreed that it was the Bloods' lucky day. In February, Roscoe turned 21, and in April, so did I. Immediately after, Pops extended an invitation for us to ride with him to Vegas. Since my brother and I were on good terms, we all agreed to roll with Pops in one of his Mercedes. Pops sped all the way there while we constantly cracked jokes. He questioned Bam and Roscoe about their prison stints and the racial riots while country music played in his stereo. After what seemed to be a short trip across the desert, we found ourselves watching my father put money in slot machines before we all unanimously agreed to try our luck at the crap table. Roscoe and Bam loved to gamble on the streets, but they had never gambled in Vegas before. I could care less about shooting dice in a casino until that night. We all took turns rolling the dice. We made it far too complicated to comprehend the similarities between a crap table in Vegas and playing craps in the backyard. The dealers in casinos tend to slow the game down add too many distractions, and beg too much. But it's actually a better gamble as far as the odds go. Not only do Vegas offer odds on your point, but also they offer a variety of other bets. And you don't lose on 11 when you bet the 10 or 4, 5 or 9, or 6-8. There are a number of other advantages as well. While Roscoe picked up the dice, the dealer confused Roscoe as Mike Tyson. "Is that you, Mike?" the pitman asked. "Mike who?" my father asked back. "Never mind," he answered. Yeah. That's Mike Tyson right there," the stick man professed. My father tried to convince Roscoe to pretend he was Tyson. He explained to Roscoe the benefits of being a gambling celebrity. "Next time you crap out, say that's ludicrous," my father joked. "Will they give me cash?" Roscoe asked. "They'll give you a marker, and then you have to sign a check," my father explained. "Hell no. I'll be under the penitentiary trying to forge that man's signature," Roscoe replied. Though the four of us are usually well-mannered in public, we all began to bicker and disrespect each other at the crap table like ignorant fools who hadn't spent much time in a public environment. Roscoe and my father took advantage of the complimentary drinks, and the way my father tipped the waitress, you would think he was trying to make sure her mortgage was paid. He gave her more money in a couple hours than he gave me in a lifetime. Simultaneously, my brother and I looked at each other and whispered, "Hi, Simon." In less than 2 hours, I lost $2,500. My brother Bam lost over $1,000, and Roscoe lost about $850. Up until then, if I were to add up all my losses prior to legally being able to gamble, I had never lost this much in total. I was sick. Likewise, my brother was highly upset. We was all ready to leave except for my father. He had plenty of money in his pockets and was determined to show us how real players roll. "This is how you roll the dice, fellas," Pops bragged. My father was a heavy gambler in the early 70s and was considered a high roller in LA from the early to late 80s. I could smell the Crown Royal on his breath every time he spoke. His drunkenness reflected in his character and his persistence to bet large amounts of money on the hard ways. The hard ways are 4 numbers, which each has their own designated spot in the center of the crap table. These numbers include 4, 6, 8, and 10. In order to win the bet, you must roll the exact pair you bet. If not, you lose the bet. The payoff for winning is usually 8-1 for 4 and 10, and 10-1 for 6 and 8. Bam couldn't hit water if he fell out of boat that evening, yet he blamed me for losses as if he was forced to bet the pass line when it was my turn to roll the dice. "It's your fault I lost my money," he yelled. "Nobody put a gun in your head and made you bet with me," I bluntly responded. I reminded Bro over and over that he's the one who can't shoot dice. "You got a stupid looking roll," I stated. Roscoe burst into laughter, pissing Bam off. While he continued to laugh at our war words, he too looked stupid and upset when he realized that between the two of us, we didn't have a dime to loan him. Our father was the only one who still had money, and he reached a boiling point after continuously hearing us argue in public. "You guys didn't lose shit," he shouted. Simultaneously, we all spat back, yelling the amounts that we all had lost. "I lost more than all 3 of you combined, so quit yelling like a bunch of little bitches," he yelled. "Suck it up, it's nothing," he continued. Roscoe laughed, but Bam and I didn't see anything funny. "The hell's so funny?" Bam asked. "You act like complaining's gonna get it back," Roscoe answered. My father was drunk as hell by then. He kept pulling out huge stacks of fresh $100 bills out of the inside of his coat pocket and dropping them all on the table like a bad habit. Then in a showing out type of manner, he showed us all how to high roll. He made $100 bets all across the board, losing each bet almost as fast as he made them. It didn't dawn on him how addicting craps could be, but nothing was worse than the chase. I couldn't feel the pain of him losing thousands on top of thousands. His loss was his loss, not mine. Though my life had already pointed in the direction of a career gambler, I had never won, lost, or chased any significant amounts of money up until this point. During the ride back across the desert, I had nightmares. My stomach turned, I couldn't sleep in the car, and each time I awakened, my ears were burning like someone was holding a lighter to my ears. That night officially changed my life forever. My competitive nature will come to the forefront, and my I can't be defeated attitude was born. They can't take my money like that, I complained. What you gonna do? Go back and rob them? Roscoe sarcastically asked. It wasn't about robbing the casino. It wasn't even about the action. It was the fact that my trousers were $2,500 lighter and I didn't have a lick of fun losing it. So many thoughts sprinted across my mind that I was beginning to think irrational. I had the nerve to think I could come up with ways to break Las Vegas in one day. After arriving home in the wee hours of the night, I climbed in bed, but I could not rest without hearing the stick man yelling in my sleep. 7 out, take the line, pay the don't. I was a pass line player, so this meant I was a loser each time this saying was heard. This saying played in my head all night. I tossed and turned, thinking that I had to return to the Silver State to avenge my losses. I did everything possible to gather up a couple $1,000s and make my inevitable return to the crap tables in Las Vegas. For some reason, I began to feel as if $2,500 wasn't enough to gamble with. So win or lose, it was mandatory that I kept a large bankroll. I progressively increased the stakes by returning with more money and a different strategy almost every time. The first strategy that I came up with was to concentrate on the 6 and the 8. These two numbers have a greater chance of coming up than any number besides 7. I was willing to press my bets each time my number was called. There was this little Asian guy directly across from me at the table. He reminded me of Mr. Miyagi in the movie The Karate Kid. He was serious about his concentration and routine. Each time the stick man pushed the dice in front of him, he would set the dice, then in a circular motion, he would toss the dice with his fingertips.
Wax on, wax off. Don't forget to breathe. Very important.
My numbers kept coming up, and I continued to press them one unit. Wax on, I would joke every time he tossed the dice. The elderly white crowd didn't find the joke funny. After approximately 27 minutes, he crapped out. Wax off, I shouted in disappointment. The majority of the people around the table laughed really hard, particularly the stick man because no one tipped him. The shooter looked at me as if he was annoyed at me. Shake it off, I said to him. I shoot for 30 minutes and you complain? He angrily replied. I hadn't even been playing craps long enough to realize what a good roll was. I was just upset that I didn't build a mountain of chips. But as I watched him, I took note of his professionalism. He was respectful, patient, and very calculated. He sparingly bet C and E while opting not to bet on other shooters. When the dice came around to me, I didn't roll any better or any worse than the others. As the night passed me by, I experimented with setting the dice like the Asian. But the stick man pressured me to hurry up by screaming, "The dice are out!" When the magical Asian got the dice back for maybe the third time, my numbers grew immensely. They went from $10 each to $75. This goofy-looking white chick walks over to the table with the beer in her hand and then interrupts the game by asking stupid questions. The Asian picked up his odds and called his bets off. On the very next roll, he crapped out. There was a loud roar at the table when he fell off. Everyone blamed the woman and complained that they should have taken their bets down. I followed their lead by turning my chips in for color. As the pit boss stacked my chips in, the total came to $4,000. I looked at the little Asian and then shouted across the table, "Thank you, master." I thought I was on.
was a hustler, moms was a shooter. Coming from the best of both worlds for the future. Raised in the turf before the world had computers. Learned the game bang from local bam, now I'm true to the set, busting back at opposition since a young nigga. I'm with Peanut, Little Waco making runs, nigga. I'm Kev Mac, pushing sacks for the fiends. Had the low rider, silver rag top, it was clean. Brother had the candy red rag on the scene. Had my first son back in '92, it all changed. Caught a lot of cases, went to prison back in '95.